Dad?
Hi, kitty girl.
Kate has one trippy dream, Beth gets some bad news, and we find out who that mystery man was at Rebecca's doorstep. So let's break down Season 3, Episode 3 of This Is Us and find out just what happened. Rise and shine on, you lovely people. Lisa here, and it is This Is Us recap time. This week's episode is called Katie Girls, and yes, we get to see all three versions of Kate in a scene together, which is actually kind of fun. Unless Kate's not your favorite character, then it might not be as fun, but I think it does give us maybe hope for older Kate, current Kate, present day Kate, whatever we're calling her, to have a new outlook on life. So fingers crossed for that. Beth, as sad as it is that she ends up losing her job in this episode, it gives me hope that they're finally doing something meatier with her on this show, giving her a meaty storyline. Like she's been there a lot. She's always kind of the rock for Randall, but I don't know if she's ever really gotten her own big drama. I'm just excited for more of Beth and to see this new dynamic between Beth and Randall now that I don't know if Randall even has a job at the moment. They just kind of both own that apartment building, right? So I'm excited to see what happens with them. But I guess we gotta start talking about what actually happens in this episode so you understand what the heck I was just saying. Unless you've already seen the episode, you know what I was just saying. But let's get started with young Jack and Rebecca, because just seeing them together makes me want more of them in my life. So in our flashback timeline, we start with Rebecca as a child and we see her grow up, and it seems like everything around her, including her own mom, the things she's reading, are basically setting the example or telling her that a woman should basically be a housewife who cooks, does the dishes, and takes care of her husband. Well, that's not the life that Rebecca wants. So we see her in high school. She trades in home ec for wood shop, where yes, the guys do make fun of her, but there's one guy who stands out and helps her and actually seems super sweet, and you're like, I could maybe root for this guy, right? Well, his name is Alan, and yes, he is that same guy that showed up on the doorstep in the last episode and messed up Jack returning Rebecca's jacket. Now, Alan is played by Hunter Parrish, and honestly, if an interview with the writers had not informed me that this was Hunter Parrish, I don't think I would have believed them. Like, I used to watch him on Weeds. He was in 17 Again, that movie with Zac Efron, but on the show, he looks so different. But that's not the point of this. So Alan was Rebecca's high school sweetheart. They dated for about 3 years, and then he ended up moving to London for a job, but he did in fact ask Rebecca to go with him, but she said no. Now, 3 years later, he still can't stop thinking about Rebecca, so he is back to win her over. Now, when they go inside her place to talk, which we kind of saw at the end of the last episode, Rebecca does linger for a second to look out in the street to see if Jack is there, but unfortunately, Jack has already driven away. But the fact that Rebecca even took that pause to look out for Jack reassured me that we wouldn't have to deal with this Alan guy for too long. Yes, we know Rebecca ends up with Jack, but there's still this kind of feeling of like, oh, will she not? Because we don't really know how long it took, right? So Rebecca and Alan go to see his parents for dinner, and I was honestly happy to see Jane Kasmerick as his mom. Well, Jane might be one of my favorite guest stars because her character, Mrs. Phillips, is actually pretty awesome, even though she's the mother of Jack's competition here. So it seems like Mrs. Phillips has actually been someone who had a big influence on Rebecca growing up. Mrs. Phillips even tells Rebecca she was won over by her when Rebecca turned down her son's proposal to go to London with him. Yeah, not quite expecting that to come out of Alan's mom's mouth, right? You think she'd be rooting for Alan. Rebecca ends up sharing her dream of going to LA to be a singer, and when she mentions possibly wanting to go there, Alan thinks very quickly and awkwardly and butts in saying, no, you should go to New York instead to pursue singing, and he's gonna go to New York too and get a new job. And you know what? Rebecca ends up saying yes to this plan, even though we do see she's still thinking about Jack and that first kiss they had. Since they're out of champagne, Rebecca goes to the store to find some to celebrate, and as fate would have it, it's not your regular trip to the store. Why? Because she runs into Jack there. You see, Jack packed up his mom and drove her to her friend's house to stay because Jack's dad was being awful again, and Jack didn't want his mom to stay with him. Jack's mom didn't want to go to her friend Cheryl's house empty-handed, so they ended up stopping at the store to get a coffee cake. And yes, it is the same store Rebecca is at, which is of course on the opposite side of town from where Jack lives, which is why Rebecca's kind of shocked to see him there. But you know what, Rebecca? take this as a sign. They have somewhat of an awkward conversation where Jack actually does say he showed up to return that jacket, but he saw Alan there. She has to explain who Alan is, and then Rebecca randomly asks Jack what his dream is. I feel like it's kind of a test, right, to see if they are compatible or not, but we've already learned they have pretty different interests. Jack says he's kind of unsure, but he wants a decent job, a wife, a family, and a house that feels nothing like the one he grew up in. And with that, the two end up saying goodbye at the store. Rebecca returns to the Phillips home and has a heart-to-heart with Mrs. Phillips, who ends up talking about her dreams and growing up, and how when she met her husband, she kind of put those things on hold because she just had this feeling about him that she knew he was a rare guy and she needed to hold on to him even if it didn't fit this so-called plan she had. Now Rebecca of course knows that she doesn't want to be a wife that waits for her husband, and even though she knows Alan would not treat her like that, she tells Mrs. Phillips there is someone else, and even though their dreams are pretty different and she doesn't know him that well, you know what? In the words of Mrs. Phillips, she already knows what Rebecca's going to say. There's a feeling. And yes, she is talking about Jack. And just like that, Rebecca remembers the street where Jack mentioned they were going to. She finds his car parked in front of a house and happens to knock on the right house. They talk a little bit more, and then she sees Jack not hesitate to start cleaning up the dishes. He'll roll up his sleeves and get his hands dirty, and I think that kind of impresses her. Like, she knows that she's not going to have to be the kind of wife with him that sits around and waits on him too. So she picks up the towel and helps him dry, and then this happens.
Do you want to go on a drive?
Where do you want to go?
Los Angeles.
Please, 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 please.
Yeah, I think this totally calls for a road trip episode with Jack and Rebecca, right? Like, sign me up, because I feel like that's such a great way for these two to truly dive in and get to know each other, to be stuck in a little car together. Or it actually could be bad, but knowing that we already know that they end up getting married, it could be fun to watch, right? So let's hope that this Alan guy is actually out of the picture and we can just get back to Jack and Rebecca, which we all want. Now on to our present day. Kevin is officially a movie star, guys. Yeah, his movies got great reviews and now he's been lined up to do a bunch of interviews. Zoe's really not about going with him to these interviews until she hears that he has one with NPR's Terry Gross, who Kevin is so out of the loop he has no idea who that is and I thinks it's a guy, but Zoe's truly excited and changes her mind about going to this interview because Terry is kind of one of her inspirations and heroes. During the interview, Terry kind of asks a typical question of Kevin, you know, if he drew inspiration for his role from Jack's experiences in Vietnam. And she continues to ask a bunch of follow-up questions, but all of these questions get Kevin kind of frazzled, and he realizes that he actually didn't know much about Jack's time in Vietnam ever because he never really asked questions, and it kind of felt like he was a little bit scared to ask questions because we see in a flashback that little Kevin, he was at the toy store, really wanted a toy gun or a toy grenade, started playing with them, but Jack kept saying no and ended up kind of getting angry and telling, you know, Kevin firmly, no, you're not getting this stuff. When Jack apologizes to Kevin and he explains that, you know, he was in war and he saw a lot of people die, so playing with guns and that kind of stuff, that's not a fun game to play war. But then he says to Kevin, you know, do you want to ask me any questions about this? So Kevin remembers he actually did have a chance to get to know his dad better, but because, as Zoe pointed out, he's the kind of guy that doesn't like to ask questions, he never got to truly know that part of his father, and that's something that he missed out on. But now Kevin's been bit by the curiosity bug. He's broken out the box of pictures and letters and stuff that his mom gave him that survived the house fire, and they have a bunch of pictures of Jack's time in Vietnam. So Kevin decides to start reaching out to other veterans in the pictures to see if any of them are still alive and if any of them are willing to talk to him about their time with Jack so Kevin can learn about that time period of his dad's life. And we actually see Kevin send an email and someone actually receiving it. And I'm excited to see Kevin explore that side of Jack, and maybe we'll learn a lot more about Jack, but maybe Kevin will end up learning a lot about himself as well. Now when it comes to Zoe in this storyline, it's kind of hard for me to tell if she's really trying to be supportive of Kevin and she really likes him, or if she's just using him, you know. She only wanted to go to his interview when she heard who the interview was with. Now she's like, yeah, let me help you find your dad and his life in Vietnam. Like, is she just being like, maybe this could spark another documentary for her? I'm still a little wary of Zoe. I think what Beth said kind of got to me. As for Randall and Kate, the episode starts off pretty awkward for them, as you would expect. Randall confronts Kate about what he heard from Kevin and about the IVF, and Kate says, her words were twisted, which isn't quite true. She tries to make it right by telling Randall that he definitely has pieces of Jack in him, and she definitely believes that, but I don't think she really feels the severity of what she said and how it hurt Randall, and she ends up telling Randall that he's overreacting, and that is a bad move because Randall then kind of does go off on her, and he's like, why are you doing IVF and paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars when you could just adopt a child? Why are you putting yourself in danger? He doesn't seem to understand it, whereas Kate is like, you don't understand why I want to have a child of my own biologically. Like, she's not opposed to adopting, but she wants to try this way to have a child genetically of her own if she can. And she points out that Randall wouldn't understand because he has 2 biological children of his own and an adopted child, but he's never had to lose a child like she did. And yes, things just get heated from both sides. They're both so hot-headed that, they're making valid points, but the problem is they're not actually stopping to see this through the other person's eyes either and understand each other, so it's just throwing insults at each other and just, there's not any compromise here. So Kate ends up flying back home and is preparing for her egg retrieval surgery. Now, everyone is worrying so much about Kate and treating her like she could possibly die the next day, which is possible, but they're really starting to freak her out. Beth is the one that tells Randall that he actually needs to try to apologize to Kate and truly apologize, and that he's actually really bad at apologizing to his siblings, and that is proven when she puts Randall on the phone with Kate, and he just can't seem to get the words out, I'm sorry. And you know what? Kate doesn't have time to sit on the phone and hear his rambling around what he is really trying to say, so she kind of hangs up on him. So what does Randall do? He decides to fly over to Kate to be there for her surgery. Who knew that the information from Beth, Miguel, and Toby's text chains would be so spot on? Beth informs us that in those chains, Miguel has said that Randall has trouble apologizing because it shows vulnerability, and Randall has always felt like he needs to be the rock for the family. Yep, that was proven in this episode. Miguel also says Randall tends to overreact. Another point checked off right on the nose. I wonder how good Miguel is with picking lottery numbers. I'd just love to sit and read that whole text chain between Miguel, Toby, and Beth. So at the hospital, Kate goes in for her surgery, and while she's under the anesthesia, she ends up having a dream where she encounters the young and the teen versions of herself. Now, of course, teen Kate is kind of annoying as expected, as she's in a very dark place in her life right after Jack died, this version of Kate. So she's pretty pessimistic and bratty, and honestly just keeps, trying to bring current Kate down by telling her she shouldn't have a baby, she'd be horrible at this. And then we get young Kate in the picture as well, who's just kind of like happy, young, and naive, right? Well, the Kates aren't the only ones in this dream. Jack is actually in the dream too, and Kate's so excited to see her dad again. He talks to her in this dream, so it's kind of like having her dad back. He ends up taking the girls to get their favorite ice cream, and it seems like this is a great place to stay. In fact, teen Kate even tries to get Kate to stay. But after seeing the kind of person that she used to be, Kate's not, gonna let that voice in her head get to her again. She's ready to kind of turn over a new leaf, turn the page, and she tells all the Kates and Jack she can't stay. But before she goes, she ends up giving teen Kate some advice and wakes up. Now, the reason that, we have this whole typical, I'm her choosing to leave, it's kind of like what we've seen in many shows and movies before. You see, what happened is Kate was having a hard time waking from the anesthesia. They couldn't wake her up. It was taking a lot longer. So, of course, she woke up at the moment she told young Kate, teen Kate, Jack that she had to go. And of course, that's what she had a choice, whether she wanted to not live or live, I guess. Now, while all that's happening, in the waiting room, Toby and Randall are having some bonding time of their own. Toby asks Randall about his anxiety, and then Toby also confesses to taking medication for depression. So I don't think he's told really anybody on the show yet about that. And he also says that when he's off of it, life can get scary, and he hopes Kate never has to see him like that. Well, here's the thing, Toby. If you don't want her to ever see you like that, why are you off your medications? Like, I get it's for the sperm count, but shouldn't you have been open with her maybe and, discuss these risks? But I get why he didn't want to as well, but let's just hope Toby gets back on those medications soon. It also seems like Toby may have actually started to want to open up to Randall maybe about this, but then that's when they were interrupted by the doctor. There is some happy news with all of this, though. The doctor was able to retrieve 8 eggs. So there's like a chance that this could happen for Kate and Toby. Randall does apologize to Kate, and in a really sweet moment where I think Kate kind of makes up for some of what she said before.
You have so much dad in you, Randall. You came across the country to say you were sorry. That's like the most dad move ever.
Randall then ends up getting a phone call and has to fly back home and straight to another hospital. He ends up going to see Chi-Chi, whose daughter Sky was beaten up and is in the hospital. And it looks like she was mugged because she was walking by herself and those street lights had never been replaced. Now, earlier in the episode, we did see Randall get a hold of Councilman Brown and confront him about not sending out the maintenance crew. It seems like Brown has his own order in what she wants to do things, and the maintenance of the rec center and the streets are pretty low on his list. Well, all of this has Randall revved up now, so when he returns home, he tells Beth that Jack was a superhero who wouldn't have sat around and waited for things to be done. He would have done things himself. So now Randall is thinking of running for councilman to get these things done. Now, as for Beth in this episode, she's been waiting for her boss to sign off on a proposal, but he ends up delivering the news that she didn't want to hear. Because of budget cuts and he says she's not as valuable to the company as her other senior counterparts, she's the member of the team who is being let go. When Beth returns home, she grabs a drink and she ends up remembering a conversation she had with William. And I love this because it means we get to see Ron Cephas Jones again, and anytime William comes back into the picture, it's kind of bittersweet, right? Well, this flashback is from the night of Randall's severe panic attack that happened in season 1, and Beth is really worried about if she can actually help Randall pick the pieces back up again. She doesn't know if she can do it, but William informs Beth that she is Randall's bass, like an instrument in the orchestra, like the root that holds things down. And while it may not be the soloist or the most glamorous position, people who truly listen to the music and everything hear that bass. It's very important, and well, Beth has always been Randall's bass, but William does say there will come a time when she will need to be the soloist and put her needs front and center, and Randall will need to be the bass.
You won't just sit there silently fiddling with your wedding ring like you're trying to remind yourself why you got married in the first place.
Well, when Randall did return from the hospital and Beth was about to fill him in on her day, Randall ended up interrupting her and just rambling and going off about running for councilman. So Beth didn't really get a word in. And we see her sitting there silently fiddling with her ring, as William kind of mentioned. But will she be silent? She's actually not. She informs Randall that she lost her job. And that wraps up the events of episode 3. Now, I know a lot of you always express how you're not fans of Kate, and I totally get that. She is definitely the least likable of the triplets, but you know what that does? That gives her even more room to grow, to have an arc, and to change. And I think that's what we're kind of starting to see the beginning of with this dream sequence, with Kate finally realizing she doesn't have to be defined by her past. She should stop listening to the black cloud that's been above her that she always mentions, and, you know, get out of her rut and start a new chapter. So I think that hopefully Kate, you know, fingers crossed that she keeps up this mindset. And I'm really rooting for the IVF to work, because honestly, if it doesn't work, then that could be something that could trigger Kate to go back to that past mindset. Or maybe she truly has turned over a new leaf, and even if that IVF doesn't work, she'll still have a positive outlook on things. I also loved getting to see Toby and Randall bond, and if you want more of them together, go look up the hilarious deleted scene that's on the This Is Us socials. It's quite funny, and I kind of wish it still had made it in the episode. But I love seeing characters interact on the show together that we don't normally get a lot of. And that's also why the mention of the Beth, Toby, Miguel text changes kind of cracked me up and made me remember how much I loved seeing them in that scene last season together. Now, one of my commenters, one of my viewers, one of you guys, Alana McMillan, I think I said that right. If not, I'm sorry. You commented on my last recap saying that, you know, she wants a dream sequence where Jack comes to talk to Beth. And you know what? That's one of the ones that I really want too. Like, I think those would be two fun characters to see together. As far as Kevin's search into Jack's past, I am excited to see that. I'm excited to meet Jack's little brother and maybe learn about another side of him. Maybe he was a different person before Vietnam. We don't really know, and I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And it's actually, you know, got me thinking, because I was reading the comments from last episode, a recap that I did. I talked to a few of you, and one of you mentioned how, you know, your dad or uncle, I think it was your dad maybe, was also in Vietnam, but he never talked about it. And it actually made me remember and realize that my own father My adopted dad, he was in Vietnam as well and never really talked to it, and I was one of those people who never bothered to ask about it either. So I actually don't know if my dad's open to talking about it. It's something I never really thought of, but this show and this storyline has made me kind of think about it. Fortunately, my dad is still alive, so I could actually ask him about it, and I think that would be kind of cool to, but it made me, you know, I never thought that I would relate to Kevin, like I said, so it's kind of fun to see different things in this show that you wouldn't think relate to you actually relate to you. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this episode. I didn't actually get a chance to see the promo for the next episode. It wasn't out when I, watched the episode online, but it looks like the episode is called Vietnam, and the tagline I read says young Jack makes a decision that will impact the course of his life. So I'm gonna guess that means choosing to go to Vietnam, or was he drafted, or did he just enlist? I guess that's what we're gonna find out. But yeah, that's enough rambling for me, you guys. Hit me up in the comments and let me know your thoughts on this episode. Do you think Randall will become Beth's base? Will they figure out what to do? Is he gonna run for councilman? What are you excited to see with young Rebecca and young Jack's love story? And what else do you want to see on the show? Let me know all your thoughts and theories down in the comments below. Then you click right over here for my recap of Manifest, as well as my interviews with the cast of the CW's brand new show, All American. It's a cool football. If you like Friday Night Lights, I feel like you might like this show. It's got football in it, and it seems really cool. But yeah, that's it for me. I'm Lisa. Thanks for hanging out with me and watching, and I'll see you next time.